Welcome back. We turn now to a story of squatters in Springfield. It's a story that has now become part of a streaming docuseries. Here to discuss the path from here to Hulu is Patti Peeples. She's Jacksonville homeowner featured on the Hulu docuseries Squatters. Patti, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Anne.
And we're also joined by Zach Roth. He is a real estate attorney here in Jacksonville with Ansbacher Law. We should note Ansbacher Law is a WJCT program underwriter. Zach, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you. And so, Patty, this is a story that dates back to 2024. Remind us how this all began for you.
Well, my business partner and I owned a couple of houses that we had purchased after I retired, and we were seeking to invest in our neighborhood of Springfield and to bring good quality, affordable housing. That went tragically wrong in one of the properties when I got a phone call that a squatter and her partner had moved into our home that I was just about to sell.
You had a contract on.
I did, yes. We had a contract on this home, and I had sent a handyman over there to do some final work. And they discovered pit bull babies and a mother dog on the porch, and that there were two squatters inside the home. And that was the opening of Pandora's box.
Yeah, and it really was a nightmare, months long. I mean, something that probably, and we'll get to it, even continues to this day. But basically, you called police, as probably most people would do. Said, there's people in my house. It didn't turn out well. You came close to being arrested yourself.
That's right. You know, it didn't really trouble me that when I saw that there were two individuals that were in the house, it appeared at first glance that they had been scammed as well. And I thought,
because they said, we have legitimately rented this parcel. This is our property. Here's a lease.
that is exactly right. And of course, I had no reason to not believe them. So I responded empathically at first, like, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to go ahead and you'll have to find somewhere else to go. And at that point, the officer that had been called to the scene indicated that there was a suggestion with evidence that he pulled up that they were serial squatters, and it then became pretty clear that her whole demeanor changed and the whole tenor of our conversation went from conciliatory to controversial. But then the police said the words you never ever want to hear is, this is something I can do absolutely nothing about criminally. You have to go through civil court. And I will admit, I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, the difference, right?
I didn't know the difference. That probably sounds extraordinarily naive to my fellow attorney right here. But I had no reason to know what any of that meant. And I certainly didn't have a sense that this was going to be truly one of the battles of my lives.
Zach, I think it's probably something well, that people really learn so much about the system when they find themselves caught in it unexpectedly, like Patty did. Remind us what the state of the law was when she first entered into this. I mean, her work helped change the law, and we'll talk about that. But at the time that she first called police, what was she up against?
Yeah, the law wasn't great for homeowners in these situations in the past because essentially you have to go through the court system to get someone out of the property. The reason the police were saying there's nothing they could do criminally is because if they can produce a lease, the police can't determine if that lease is fake. We have to go to court. You have to prove that that lease is fake and obtain possession of your property. So back then, the only option was to hire an attorney and go through the significant time and expense of proving that this wasn't the case. By then, as I'm sure Patty will mention, the house has probably been destroyed. That's a pretty typical path. And then you hope from there you haven't lost all your investment in trying to get it fixed back up so you can do what you want with your property, because the police are not going to be able to say, okay, these are squatters. We know they're squatters. We're going to arrest them. And they have a higher burden of proof on the criminal side than you have on the civil side. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And so given that these professional squatters know that, they would produce these fabricated leases, which would then put a sufficient doubt that would put you into civil court, open your checkbook up, and open up however long it took to get the process done.
Right. And there's a reason we don't want police on the street making judgments about the legitimacy of documents, right? So
Mhm.
if you produce a lease, they have
Mhm.
to defer to that. I mean, you hope that when you get your house back that it is perhaps worn but not necessarily destroyed. In your case, it really was pretty much destroyed. What was the condition of the house when they finally vacated the property?
Well, the condition of the house when they took possession of the property was absolutely pristine. And we had replaced carpets, all of the appliances were brand new. There was landscaping. It was a beautiful turnkey
Freshly
property.
painted, it was really pretty.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It was ready to go. When they vacated, they had taken sledgehammers to the historic plaster walls, had destroyed it where you could literally see from one room through the studs into another room. They had smeared feces, dog and human, all over, broken eggs several days prior, obviously, because there was maggots and other disgusting things. Windows broken. They had stolen several appliances. It was just completely trashed with nothing but anger and retaliation behind it.
And just remind us, I mean, what were you feeling at that moment when you got back into your house? It had been more than a month and found this level of damage.
I think it was just complete and utter astonishment, and then the wheels were turning at how just extraordinarily unfair this whole situation was. First of all, the onus is on me, the legitimate homeowner, to prove that this is my house. The burden of proof was not on them, it was on me, and that seemed unfair. Secondly, I had given these people a free place to stay with water and electricity while they worked the system. And I had to hire attorneys and lose a home sale and lose rent. All of this was falling on me. There was nothing that was fair about this situation. And at that point I thought, I just don't see how this can legitimately be something that happens in the United States of America, where my home is not a protected asset. And this is just an egregious oversight in law.
Some $40,000 that you had to then repair the home with. So
That
no
was just the cost of repairing the home. That did not include losing the home,
losing the
the
home
home
sale.
sale, because the market had fallen a bit. So when I got an offer on it after fixing it up, it was about $20,000 less. So I considered that a loss. It took us almost 4 months while they were in the house and then repairing it and then selling it.
And legal
So
fees.
I lost rent during that time, the cost out of pocket for legal fees, the enormous emotional toll of going through this literally every day, being threatened, being physically assaulted, being told by police that if I stepped my foot on my property, that I would be arrested. I want your viewers and listeners to think about that for a minute. If you put your foot on your own property, when someone who is unlawfully occupying it has more rights than you. And I understand Zach's clearly laid out the fact that police cannot deduce lawful or unlawful occupancy, but in the big picture, there's just nothing fair and right about that. And I felt like there had to be something done about that.
Yeah, I mean, the indignation and the kind of grief that Patty felt over this whole situation, Zach, obviously motivated her to get involved beyond just her own circumstance, but to really push to change the law. And that was something that she needed to take to the legislature. And that is something that did change. I want to ask you about that, but we have a question from Brenda on Facebook that feeds into that, which she says, once you go to civil court and it's deemed that the lease is a fake, is there not a law that immediately that person is held criminally liable?
No, the criminal system and the civil system are completely separate. You might be able to seek sanctions or something like that from the judge, but typically in the civil side, your sanctions you're talking about are monetary. And I think, as Patty can reference, monetary claims in this circumstance are worthless. That's why they're squatting in these homes to begin with. So no, it's not going to move over to criminal. You could maybe identify that for the criminal to consider, but there's nothing automatic about it.
And so, what did legislators ultimately put in place to try to remedy or prevent this from happening to other homeowners?
They implemented an extrajudicial process, which I think is a fantastic step because Patty alluded to the emotional toll that it takes. And I think that's something that people don't realize. You lose the financial aspects of it, you lose your time, but you also lose your emotional energy. It's something you live with forever, living in the court system, the process, the time it takes. We've now removed this from that, and we've implemented a system where essentially, if you swear to certain things in an affidavit and deliver that to the sheriff is required to go remove the person. And in the event, because of the concern we've discussed about, well, maybe the lease was legitimate, there are rights in that statute to protect a situation where maybe someone does have a legitimate lease. If this was an abused process, though, given the consequences, I feel like it is probably unlikely that it's going to be an abused process. It makes things much more efficient, much less expensive, and much less emotionally taxing.
And so, there are some circumstances, as you say, to make sure that somebody who's a rightful occupant is not removed just because a landlord has a grievance or they haven't perhaps been a great tenant. And, those are things in the law that required that, the person must have unlawfully entered and continued to stay when they've been told to leave, that the person evicting them must be the owner or the agent of the property. But it does seem that there's a few possible loopholes there because some of the things, it can't be a family member. I mean, certainly there are circumstances where someone claims to be a family member or is, perhaps a family member relation. That is not a circumstance where this law applies. There can't be any previous litigation between you and the person. And so if there's, something in the works between a landlord and a tenant already, that can prevent this law from being effective. So there's still some footholds that people could have, presumably, to legally squat.
Yeah, it's not perfect yet, but it's the first stab at solving a major problem, and it's a significant advancement because one thing that I like about it is Patty alluded to the burden shifting to her as the rightful owner of the property. It kind of eliminates some of that burden element on the rightful owner and says basically, if you're willing to swear that these things are true and deal with the consequences if they are not, we now shift the burden to the person who is more likely to be unlawfully in the property, which is a much more fair way of handling it. There's probably kinks we need to work out as we use this in practice, but it's clearly a better system than what we had.
Sure.
And it's more expeditious. I think that's one of the most important parts. When you go through the civil system, this can be days to months to years, depending on what state you're in. Here in Duval County, it was months. And then when you get the order of ejectment, which is the terminology for an unlawful tenant, not eviction, but ejectment, then they have another 24 hours to leave and vacate the property, which this is the part that's so insane to me, is that it's been proven now in civil court that they are unlawful, but yet they have 24 hours to mosey on out, not under police custody or anything. And where do they go? These particular squatters went right down the road to their third squatting location. And so in every situation, I think the law that existed or the lack thereof gave opportunity for squatters to continue to squat.
Yeah.
What a lot of them do in that 24 hours, they use that to destroy the home because they're mad that they've lost out. And so it basically gives them a 24-hour party fest to destroy someone else's property that's been proven was somebody else's property.
Now, one of the things that I think is really important, and maybe some of your callers are raising this, but we have the law. But in Florida, I'm not sure that it is being consistently and completely applied. I get a number of emails after each one of these documentaries or news programs airs from various people that are going through their own squatter situation. And the most recent one I received is a lady that owns a home in Lakeland, And she happens to live in Washington State, but she has been calling and working with the local police in Lakeland to try to get these squatters out of her home with absolutely no success. They're not applying the law. So I think that's one of the things that I'd be really interested to hear is while we have the law, the next step is application and enforcement of the law.
Yeah, and so, I mean, what ultimately happened to the people that were in your house is something that I wanna get to. I just briefly wanna take a call from Eugene on the north side. Good morning, Eugene, go ahead.
Hey, good morning to all. Uh, my heart goes out to Miss Patty. Uh, she's a realtor and a broker for numerous family members of ours. And just inquired to my wife a month or so ago about how
Eugene, you're
she's
breaking up
doing.
on us a little bit, but I understand that she was your broker and, that you are supportive of her. So this segment that you are a part of, it is one of several on this Hulu docu-series, and it is, I would say, Zach, in some ways, not anywhere near even the worst, which is a little hard to believe.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy the things that people deal with this. I've said it many times when people have come to me. These are not people that move in and say, "Let's see how long we can stay here." These are professionals, and in many cases, they're professionals that have certain mental illnesses or something, drug addiction issues, things like that, that then lead to some wild stories.
Yeah. And so were you surprised by anything that you saw in that series?
I would say, unfortunately, no. I mean, maybe the individual facts surprise you, but the overall idea that such terrible things are happening, no, because you see it so often. It's, Patty's story is horrific and an example, but I've heard many other examples of people coming in and me having to give the advice of that we've talked about. If it's going to be expensive, it's going to be emotionally taxing, and then maybe at the end of it, you can spend more money to get back what you already had.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking to real estate lawyer Zach Roth and former landlord Patti Peeples about her squatter's horror story. It's one of several included in a new Hulu docuseries. We've got to take a brief timeout. We'll be back right after the break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Zach Roth, attorney, Patti Peeples, who has had her story about a squatter's nightmare here in Springfield become part of a Hulu docuseries that is now airing. Patty, a lot of people, heard about this story in fits and starts when it was happening and then when it was adjudicated and there was punishment delivered to these squatters in your house. They were, or at least one of them was criminally penalized. So tell us a little bit about the judge in this case. The judge, I believe, rejected a plea deal, imposed some more severe punishment. But tell us what the punishment was and then what has happened since.
Well, there was punishment, but I would say it would be lowercase punishment and probably not consistent with the crime. Yes. So I worked with the state attorney. Once one of the squatters was arrested on another charge, I'm assuming somehow she ended up in court, and at that point, she was then charged with the damage to my property. Um, One of the challenges was that one, the law that was passed on property rights was not in effect, obviously, when this squatter was squatting. So we couldn't use that law for any positive intent with my case. However, we did seek some damages for all of the destruction that she did, but we couldn't prove that she was the only one or actually the one that did it because we didn't have a camera on her while the house was being destroyed. The fact that it was pristine and then damaged and they were the occupants was not enough in court. Uh, but we sought damages of about $2,500, and the judge rejected that and said that that was insufficient for the level of the crime, and so she raised that amount. We won damages in the amount of $3,500, and this particular woman then left the court and went into jail, supposedly for 30 days. They let her go after 19. I don't know why. And she was due to pay us $200 a month until she satisfied the damage amount, as well as needed to either remain full time employed or full time in school. Those were the two conditions. And she didn't do any of those. Immediately, we started being in arrears on the damage payment, and I don't know that she was working or in school based on what I could see through her Facebook profile. So I just felt like the whole system really failed.
And we should say, speaking of her Facebook profile, I mean, even recently, since this Hulu series started airing, she's been in touch with you again?
Yeah, this is the second squatter that got a little less airtime. But she has repeatedly reached out to me on Facebook. And then after this most recent documentary aired, she accused me of lying. She accused me of stealing the puppies and the mother dog, which was completely nonsensical. And then told me that I should watch my back and that I should be careful.
And what of that, Zach? I mean, is that a threat? Is that something that Patti should be taking action on? What options would she have?
Yeah, I think the idea of watch your back, I think, would be construed by most people as a real threat. Some of this is just harassment, but maybe not a threat. But the idea of watch your back, I think, crosses a line. And there are statutes out there that create stalking, including cyber stalking, such as repeatedly sending messages, as a crime. It's a misdemeanor until there's a credible threat, is the term that the statute uses. If there's a credible threat, then it becomes a felony. So there could be issues out there with that.
What lessons should people be taking from Patti's experience from this docu-series if they're a homeowner or somebody that's renting or just even thinking about acquiring property?
Yeah, I think one thing, and Patty's alluded to it a little bit, is have cameras. So that way you build the proof when someone does this, because you can't have sentinels outside the houses, right? You know, especially if you own more than one, like Patti did. You can't be everywhere at once. So have systems in place so you can learn things quickly, especially now under the law that Patti was instrumental in having passed. If you identify someone quickly using your cameras, you can immediately move to begin that process and not have the extended period that Patti mentioned. I think having people help you, management companies, things like that, whose job it is to keep tabs on these, is also helpful, because a lot of people own rental properties but are full-time employed doing something else. And this is something that if it happens, it needs immediate attention, not when you can get to it. And then part of it is just understanding the law and what your rights are, so that when you go to move into a process, for example, let's set aside the squatter situation, but somebody asks, hey, can I stay in the property? Understand the ramifications of what happens if you say yes, because you may be unlocking a Pandora's box there, because as you noted, if it was with permission, statute doesn't apply, you're back in court. So understanding what your rights are as an owner before you ever get into it is critical.
Well, it is a fascinating series, unfortunately a fascinating story, but appreciate you sharing it with us. Patti Peeples, Zach Roth, thank you both for coming on today.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
your
Thank you.
interest, Ann.